Hello and welcome back to the No Dig Norfolk Gardener, and today we will show you what an abundant autumn harvest can look like from your garden. Also, it's time for us to be sowing our broad beans for an earlier harvest in 2023. Now, it's an absolutely gorgeous autumn day here in our garden in Norfolk. We're in mid-autumn now, so we're in October. We have November to go, and then of course we move into winter. But you know, when you sow things ready for a harvest for this time of the year, there are so many amazing things. In storage we already have our potatoes, which you can see I've taken some out of storage. There's some shallots in there already, they've come out of storage. Down in our house we also have the squash that we've picked. All these things are there and available for us to use whenever we want to dip into them to use. But also outside in your vegetable plots, there is still lots that you can be harvesting there. If, like us, you took the trouble to sow things and to get them in and follow the harvest that you actually took earlier on in the year, back in June and July. And then of course there are those crops that are in the ground quite a long time. Things such as celeriac and parsnip, which they're a long season growing crop. They're one of the few crops that are grown in the garden where they're in there all year and not what we call a half-season crop. One thing I did just want to mention was about the carrots. You probably remember 2 or 3, maybe 4 videos back, we put a video out there where we were harvesting our spring sown carrots, and we wanted to freeze some of those in order that we ensured that we had carrots available to us at a time maybe when there weren't carrots available. The one thing I wanted to say was thank you so much for the absolutely wonderful comments that we got. It was just amazing. Even those of you that don't freeze your carrots and have other ways of storing them. It was just amazing to hear, because it's something that myself and Mrs. W haven't particularly done. But we've seen your comments and we thought, let's give it a go. Why not? Why not? Let's give it a go. Now, if Mrs. W just swings round, you can see that our carrots that we sowed back in June, these followed our onions, the summer onions, the ones that we overwintered from the previous year. They've followed those, but we have plenty of carrots in there, and they will see us easily right through to the new year. But where you see this bare piece of soil here, this was where the carrots were that we sowed back at the end of March. And what was left we decided to harvest and take on board some of the comments that you'd left us. And as I said many times before, it's why we love our channel, because people just have such great ideas, and you know, you learn things from us, but we equally learn things from you. You know, we're here to learn together. And so what we've done is we've actually taken these carrots and we're going to keep them in these sacks. Now we have 2 particular types of carrots that were harvested. We've got a sack like this which has got these burlicum in, and they're slightly larger, and they'll be really good for us to be able to use in our trivets and our stocks and in that way. But then the little finger carrots that we grew, if you remember, they were sort of about as long as my finger and about as thick as my little finger. And they're lovely eating carrots, and we got, you know, got some of those in a sack in our garage. So we've left some soil on there, and that should help. And we've taken the green tops off so that those green tops are not taking the energy out of that plant. And we shall see how long they will store for and how long we can keep them. So let's go and see just what we do have to harvest from our autumn garden. Now, the first thing we're going to start with is some spring onions. And I always think this is the great thing about multi-sowing your spring onions. You know, you've got your bunch. Again, myself and Mrs. W are going to need these later on in the week to use in our stir fries. Spring onions go really well with those. I know we've got a meal planned during the week for that. So they're nice and ready. Next, what we want to be able to do is to harvest a parsnip. I know I've said many times that, you know, they do need a frost on them. We still haven't yet had a frost. But Mrs. W does insist that we have parsnips with our meal. And actually we've had such great germination this year, and we've actually got 2 rows of parsnips here that, you know, we can afford to be eating some of these, and they'll still be here at the turn of the year, and certainly be here in November when the first frosts do come to Norfolk. Now, you don't often see me with a fork in my hand, but what we do here is that I don't go about digging. What we do is just to try and loosen things a bit in order that we can get the parsnip up. So the soil is actually never turned over. We have it.
Lovely.
Told you Mrs. W would be pleased. She does love a nice parsnip. I mean, so do I. But there, you know, you probably heard the bottom of the root snap as I was pulling it up. But it was probably down to here somewhere. And just goes to show you really that even in no dig soil, you can grow lovely long parsnips. So parsnips are one of those crops that we grow that are in the soil for a very long time. They were actually sown back in the first week of April, and of course we're now harvesting it now as we're in sort of late October. The spring onions, they just follow on, you know, you just resow them every 6 weeks or so that you get a continuous crop. But now we come to a harvest that's a successional harvest. And in this bed here we had our main crop potatoes, which were Maris Piper, which we have all bagged up and in the garage keeping nicely for us. But following those was some calabrese that I sowed and planted in here. On the other side there are some cabbages. Cabbages are not going to be ready until the turn of the year, that's fine. And of course in the next bed next to those is where the purple sprouting broccoli is. And again, that's for a harvest next year. But for this autumn, as you can see, we have some absolutely amazing calabrese. And this is a variety called Marathon, and it produces lovely heads. And I sowed these back in June. Mid-June they were sown, and by mid to late July the potatoes all came out of here, and then these plants were popped into the ground. And as I say, we're sort of late October now, and you can see that these are now ready for a lovely harvest. And it is something that myself and Mrs. W do want today. So, what I am going to do is to just take this here, and I'm not going to pull any of those leaves off because I know that we use the leaf as well as this domed head. The same with the stalk, even though it's autumn, because it's been grown really nicely. You probably saw the way the knife fell through it, and all of this stalk can be eaten. There's a lot of food there, and just the right size for 2 people. Now, one of the differences that we have with our calabrese that are harvested this time of the year is that I leave these in the ground, because from here you can see there's already some coming. There will be some side shoots, and they will produce some tiny little florets that we'll be able to use as a bonus crop. They do that in the summer too. Now, the only reason why we don't do this in the summer is because we generally need that space to plant something else as a succession crop. But at this time of the year, I don't need this available to me. I shan't need it until next spring. So they can stay in there as long as they need to make their side shoots and give us a bonus crop. Now, you join us up in bed 5, and I want to harvest our first celeriac of the season. Now, I know that some of you have been asking questions about the celeriac, and we've been talking about it for most of the year. I extol its virtues, and I still stand by that. Once your celery is finished and the frosts have come, they haven't here yet, but they will do in the next couple of weeks. We will see a frost. It starts to kill off the celery. But these little ladies, well, they will sit here, no problem, unless it's a really, really harsh frost. They'll be unaffected. So what do we do with them? That's what a celeriac actually looks like, and I can tell you from here, without getting any closer to it, I can smell celery. It's really quite pungent, and it's a great alternative to celery. And all you need to do is just chop these roots off, and then it leaves you the round bulb, and then you just peel the skin off, and then you have access to the vegetable that you want to eat underneath. These leaves are really quite pungent too, and we generally use those leaves and actually put them into trivets because they smell of celery too and add more flavour to your stocks and gravies. Everything is sieved out at the end anyway, so, but that just, yeah, you can really smell that lovely celery taste. Now, these will stay in the ground and get ever larger. There are some larger ones that are actually in here. I've just chosen to pick this one today. And as we get more and more rain, they will swell up all the more. We've got many, many leeks in here. In fact, there are over 80 leeks in this 4-foot wide bed. And we haven't had a leek yet this season, so really looking forward to having our first leeks. So we never actually turn the soil over. All we do is loosen the soil in order that we can release the leek. And it's the one time that I do something different to a lot of people that are no dig. A lot of people multi-sow their leeks and then only put them in about so far. But myself and Mrs. W do like the white blanched piece of the leek. So we do exactly the same, that we dib the hole down there 5 or 6 inches or so, in order that the bottom part of the leek is nice and white. But like I say, we're not turning over the soil, we are just loosening it in the same way that we would for the parsnips. There you go. Our first leek of the season. Now you can see that rust is starting to come. It's not a huge amount, so it's not affected the overall plant, but it is starting to come, and that's something that you will find with leeks, that they will develop rust. It seems almost inevitable. But yeah. First leek of 2022. So as I said, we also want to be sowing our broad beans. Now, broad beans can be sown any time from now through to next year. we like to sow broad beans at this time of the year, get them in the ground during November to give us a slightly earlier crop the following season. There's often been said that you should sow the seeds on this side so that this bit is pointing uppermost. That's where the new stem and leaf is going to come from. I have to confess, I don't worry about doing that. I've done it both ways and they germinate just as well as far as I'm concerned. So I don't even bother looking to do that anymore. I just drop the seed in. Now they will send down a taproot, and you don't need to be worrying that, you know, when these hit the bottom, that, you know, is going to cause them some stress. Even if the taproot hits the bottom and you can't get them out into the garden because of adverse weather, they'll just coil themselves around a bit, and actually once you can get them into the ground, the taproot will just find its way down into the ground anyway. And for myself and Mrs. W last year, we found that was the case, in that our broad beans, when they went out, we had a massive root. We couldn't get them out until December because it was quite a damp and wet November last year. So it was sort of like the first week of December before we could get them out. But they grew perfectly fine, and if you go back and look through our playlist and see when we planted those and then when we had the harvest last May and June, it had absolutely no effect on them whatsoever. I'll just cover them over. And then we'll give them a good watering. So pop the label in, and they are broad bean aquadulce. They do tend to overwinter really, really well. So does the Sutton. And if you remember last year, we did a bit of a trial where we did half our broad beans with aquadulce and the other half with the Suttons. Now, both were a nice flavour, but the aquadulce did come a bit earlier actually, and it appeared to be a stronger plant to us. And although there are not so many pods on it, they're bigger beans, so one balances out the other, and on balance we decided to go with the aquadulce for all of our broad bean crop for the coming season. So they will now go into our polytunnel, and all being well, in a month to 5 weeks time, and sometime in November, with the weather being kind to us, they'll actually be in the ground and growing away. And then of course our lovely harvest that we went round and got a little earlier. It just goes to show you what you can achieve in your garden with just a little bit of planning. Hopefully that illustrates to you that, you know, autumn can be just as abundant as your summer harvests. And there are different vegetables, such as leeks and your celeriac and your parsnips, but they can also be joined by things like calabrese, cauliflower and cabbage. If you like this video, then please give us a thumbs up. We shall see you next time.